small garages and many of the small boutiques are self-taught. So there are basic courses for winemaking practice in Israel, but most of the big wineries are bringing winemakers who are trained outside of Israel. And to be perfectly honest with you, as a winemaker and an employer of a winemaker, I would be much more comfortable bringing a winemaker in who has a greater worldview and who has gone to a school that gives you a greater worldview. So I'm very happy that a lot of young Israelis are going out to learn winemaking in California and in Australia and in France and Italy. And it makes me feel much more comfortable about the professionalism of the people that are coming back to work in the wine business.
Would you ever hire an Israeli winemaker trained in Israel?
No. Not as a primary enologist, perhaps as a winemaker assistant, but there are no courses, so there are no courses in Israel, so the point's fairly moot.
When I was there last year, I spoke to a large number of winemakers. They said there weren't a lot of mechanisms or forums for sharing information. Is that something that's peculiar to the Israeli winemaking mindset, or is it part of the Israeli mindset, or is it just the nature of the industry being so young?
I got into the wine business when I was in the 1990s, and we have a consultant winemaker from California, and we met a lot of winemakers from the New World, and there's a lot of sharing and caring. California, you can ask your neighbors for help and they'll help you, and there are wine institutes that help. Unfortunately, Israel hasn't got that touchy-feely industry yet. There are winemaker forums where winemakers together sit and they talk about the wines that they've made, and they talk about their winemaking together. But generally, an event like this, for example, there should be 50 wineries outside, and unfortunately there are 20 wineries. I'd love you to see much more of the wines that are being produced from Israel, and you're going to get a very good taste of what's going on. The wines outside, I mean, all the wineries are producing excellent wines, but I would like more variety to be seen, some of the smaller producers to come and show their wines, and that's a function of how well the industry cooperates, because there's no government incentives and there's no spare money. Everybody who's come here has more or less financed their own trips. So there's no government money to help promote the Israeli wine industry. We're doing the best that we can on a shoestring budget, but I do believe that wineries could talk a little bit more together and cooperate a little bit more.
There's also no regional association of wine producers in the Levant, in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Do you think that's a possibility? Cyprus or Turkey, or maybe someday Lebanon?
It's the ultimate dream. I believe that peace builds trade and trade builds peace. But unfortunately, we're not at peace with most of our neighbors. I think we could probably start talking to the Greeks and the Cypriots, and now that we're friends again with Turkey, then we can talk to the Turks. But I think we need to start talking to ourselves and talking within our industry in order to get the outreach to our neighbors.
Now, Israel's certainly the largest single source of kosher wine in the world. But not all Israeli wine is kosher, and not all kosher wine is Israeli. Does the kosher requirements for making that kind of wine, does that get in the way of ultimate quality, or is there no effect on the ultimate expression of quality and deliciousness if you make a kosher wine?
Technically speaking, there's no difference between a kosher wine and a non-kosher wine. And I think the people to ask are not myself, who got into the business and understood the realities, and it's a sad reality of the business that most of the wines that we sell are sold within the Jewish community. But you'll have to ask the winemakers who have become kosher since then, and ask them whether it's been a hurdle. And I don't think it is. We use the same yeast as everybody uses. We use the same winemaking practices that everybody uses, and there is no difference between a kosher and a non-kosher wine. There are a few products that we can't use, but there are workarounds.
It's more of a pain in the tush for you as a winemaker than it is in terms of affecting the ultimate quality of the wine for a consumer. Is that fair to say?
It's very frustrating for somebody who's not religious. Because the main difference in making kosher wines to non-kosher wines is that all our employees have to be Sabbath observant. So if you're not Sabbath observant, you're very limited in what you can do. You can't go up and taste some wines from the barrel. You can't go up and draw samples for yourselves. So that's the frustrating part. But winemaking is the same winemaking all over the world.
The process is the same. What percentage, just to ask you to take a guess here, what percentage of winemakers in Israel would you say are not kosher, are not Sabbath observant?
90%?
90%?
80%?
The vast majority of winemakers.
Right.
And yet they're able to make these wines even though they can't touch them.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Is your winemaker Sabbath
religious?
observant? No. Interesting. Which brings us to the other 800-pound animal in the room, Mavushal wines, which are flash pasteurized to make the wine and remain kosher even if it's touched by someone who's non-Sabbath observant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that process negatively impact the taste of a wine?
That process changes the taste of the wine. And I don't believe it changes the wine negatively. It brings on its own issues and its own demands, but we meet those demands and we meet those issues. In my travels, I have done many wine tastings blind, where I've taken the same wine, one which is mavushal and one which is not mavushal, and I put them side by side, and I've asked the tasters whether they can spot the mavushal wines. Now, 50% of the people in the room could spot the mavushal wine, and 50% couldn't. And 50% preferred the non-mavushal wine, and 50% preferred the mavushal wine. So I think technology now has got to a stage where it doesn't matter whether the wine is mavushal or non-mavushal, but we tend to get sidetracked by this mavushal issue and by the whole issue of kashrut. Israel is a nation that produces wine, and I think we are a nation that deserve recognition as a wine-producing nation. And I think that you as consumers don't go to a supermarket and go to a kosher section of a supermarket when you buy cornflakes and when you buy tomato ketchup. So why should you go to a wine store and go to a kosher section when you're buying Israeli wines? You should go to an Israeli section. And I realize all of the hurdles that there are in this country for making that happen. But the Greeks have their own section, the Turks have their own section, the Cypriots have their own section. Why shouldn't the Israelis have their own section? It's a convenience of distribution of the people who distribute our wines that we are put together in the kosher section. But we produce wines from Israel, and we're very good at what we do. And as a curious wine consumer walks into a shop and says, "Oh, that's interesting, wines from Greece or wines from Turkey," they should be given the same opportunity without having to go to kosher because, "Oh, I'm not a kosher wine drinker, I'm not Jewish, I don't care about that." But they should be given the same opportunity as the producers from Greece and Turkey, Uruguay, Paraguay, any of these obscure wine-producing countries that they are afforded. And I think that's our biggest challenge, is getting ourselves out of the kosher section and getting ourselves recognized as wine producers.
And of course, I heard it over and over again when I was there last year that the vast majority of the wines that are made in Israel are kosher, but they're non-mavushal. They're made exactly the same
Absolutely
way other wines are. And they should be respected for their deliciousness and their quality, and that they just happen to be kosher. And if that's important to you as a consumer, fine. If it's not, it's an added value you don't have to consider for a whit. It's just,
well, that's absolutely right.
It's a gift with purchase.
Yeah, it's like buying cornflakes.
Mm-hmm.
You'll buy cornflakes because you want cornflakes, and if you need them to be kosher, well, you have kosher cornflakes and you have kosher tomato ketchup. But you're not going to go to a kosher section specifically to go and find them.
Which begs the question: what wine goes with cornflakes? I was a syrup steward at the International House of Pancakes before I became a wine steward. I have the last question is a rhetorical question, but you answered it in part. What do you think, besides the issue of respecting the wines for their quality, negating the question of kosher, what is the biggest challenge for Israeli wine in the next 5 years?
I think our biggest challenge is to get people to drink more Israeli wine, to appreciate Israeli wine, and to expand our market further than the shores of Israel, and to get the non-identifying. Okay, let's call it as it is. 95% of our consumers are Jewish, and our biggest challenge is to get that down to 5% of our consumers being Jewish, and 95% being not Jewish. It's our ultimate dream, but I'll settle with 50-50.
Well, I think we should start assisting Alex immediately. We'll go into the next room for the tasting. Do you want to say anything in closing?
I want to say one thing for closing, if I may. First of all, I want to thank you both for the very frank and honest discussion on stage, and I hope it gave you a little bit of insight into our successes and also into our challenges. But I wanted to take this opportunity, and unfortunately, a young lady that was standing here all along your discussions wasn't introduced before, and I have to introduce her for two reasons. One, she spent hours and hours in organizing this event, and the second reason, she's the focal point for any question that you may have, and we are based here in New York, so for any question you may have on the wine industry or on wine in Israel or on activities in Israel that are regarding to wine, she's the person to talk to, and the lady's name is Hannah Kamionski, and unfortunately she was here and now she's probably gone to organize something. But I really want to take this opportunity to thank her, and again, if you see her, she's your person for further questions and activities. So thank you, and
thank you very much.
Thank you.